Welcome to the Rancho Mirage Public Library. Good afternoon, everybody. This is an event that we are video streaming globally. So you all in Rancho Mirage are seeing this in the flesh, as we say. If you're in Boise, hello, Boise. If you're in Beijing, hello, Beijing. If you're in Bali, hello, Bali. And you're most welcome to join us today electronically. This is a very special day for us. My name is David Bryant. I have the great privilege to be the library director and the executive director of the Writers Festival. And I will tell you that this is just a remarkable event that we, fifth year in January 24th, we'll start our fifth year as Writers Festival. And this library will be packed with over 1,000 people whom we call readers, and some are angels, and they just turn this incredible facility into a university of higher learning and appreciation for the written word. So we're very excited about that. Craig Johnson is giving us our third event in the Rancho Mirage Writers Festival Writers Series. Of course, as always, before we begin, I want to thank our City Council for its full support of all that we do in this library. We are a city department. Of course, we think of ourselves as being a little bit special, but we are a city department, and this city council has just been so generous to us and so supportive of some of the wacky ideas we've had and some of the very important ideas we've had and some of the great ideas they've generated, and their support for this library is incredible. Mayor Charles Townsend is with us today. Council members Dana Hobart and Ted Weil are here. Please give them a round of applause. We also want to thank Jamie Kabler. Jamie is the Writers Festival founder. Jamie and Helene are way up north on the first Writers Festival cruise, this one to Alaska with 35 festival readers. So Jamie, if you're watching on YouTube, hi. Judy Johnson, Craig's wife, is here today. Welcome, Judy. The smart staff of Follett Books is here to provide an opportunity. They're located in the back of this beautiful community room, and they're here to provide an opportunity following his talk to purchase Craig's books. Craig Johnson's newest book, The Western Star, was released yesterday. So you'll be one of the first to have it signed after his talk, and you can read it tonight. We encourage that. Craig Johnson is the best-selling and award-winning author of the Longmire Mystery Series, which follows a rural sheriff, Walt Longmire, in fictional Durant, Wyoming, in the fictional Absaroka County, also in Wyoming, of course. His books are the basis for the popular Longmire TV series. The Western Star is the 13th novel in the series. Craig Johnson has been a police officer, an educator, a cowboy, and a longshoreman. Now he is a very successful author. I love that resume because I'm sure that those experiences, as we may find out this afternoon, had a lot to do with his storytelling. In early July, Craig celebrated the 6th annual Longmire Days with 15,000 people in Buffalo, Wyoming. Craig is a master storyteller with timeless characters and a great setting. The modern world with a Western tilt. Speaking of a Western tilt, I made that look easy, didn't I? Nothing to it. You go to the store, you buy the hat. I'm all hat, no horse. Craig lives in the real West in Ucross, Wyoming, population 25, but he's with us today. Let's give a great Rancho Mirage welcome to author Craig Johnson.
Thank you, sir. Hey, he looks pretty good in that hat, doesn't he? Look at that. He ought to wear that more often. I got to tell you, it was funny. I was doing it at the Tucson Book Festival, and it was funny like that because I was fortunate enough to be able to talk Robert Taylor and Lou Diamond Phillips into coming with me to the Tucson Book Festival, and they're great guys, and they're unique, in the acting field because they can read, and and they came down there, and it was really kind of fun like that. But one of the funny things that happened was we were supposed to go over to Arizona Public Radio or Public Television to do an interview like that. And I remember going in and sitting down like that, and there was some discussion going on in the background and all this like that. And then finally, the young woman came up, and she was very nervous, and she said, "We've got a request, from the producer of the television show." And I said, "Sure, what's that?" Like that, and she goes, "Can you take your hat off?" And I said, "Well, it comes off, but do you mind if I ask why?" And she said, "Well, they're having a little bit of trouble trying to light it." And I said, "Are you telling me I'm the first person to wear a cowboy hat on Arizona Public Television? Really?" So they kind of broke down after that, and let me keep the hat on. I was lucky enough to have that happen. Now, I am Craig Johnson. I am the author of the Walt Longmire books. I make my home in Ucross, Wyoming, population 25, 23 today, because Judy and I are here, and I am here for the 13th book, in the Walt Longmire series, The Western Star, which is a little bit different from maybe some of the other books that I've done like that. This one has a really strong kind of a train reference to it, and I've got to be honest with you that my love of trains, came from a very early age. When I was about 5 years of age, they used to have these coal trains that would go through town, and the only thing I knew about those trains was they were going somewhere that I'd never been. And so I kept, really kind of stuck in my mind after a while. And so what I finally did one day was I actually made a plastic, garbage bag full of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and a gallon of Kool-Aid and jumped on one of those coal trains. And I climb up onto this coal hopper and I get up there and I'm riding well, it gets dark and I fall asleep, and I wake up and it's still rolling. It gets sunny and the sun comes out I'm still going and all of a sudden, I go through this switch yard, and I'm going through this switching yard, and I see this one guy looking at me as I'm going across and I'm all covered with coal dust. I'm just black as I'm going along and so they stop the train and they haul me down off the train, and the switchman goes, he says, "Son, where are you from?" And I told him and he said, "Son, that's 300 miles away. You're not from there." And I said, "Yeah, that's where I'm from." And he said, "Do you have a phone number?" And I said, yeah. And so I gave him my phone number. He called home to my very anxious mother. I had been gone for about 48 hours and my father came and picked me up 287 miles later, and it was a very long ride home, is all I can tell you. And not a welcome reception once I finally did get home, I can tell you that much too. But most recently, the exciting thing that happened was I actually got the opportunity to go and be the keynote speaker for the Wyoming Peace Officers Association meeting in Casper, Wyoming. It was really great because I got to go speak to all of the sheriffs and all the chiefs of police and the highway patrolmen and all of them there in Wyoming, which was just a blast for me because if anybody understands Walt Longmire, those guys understand Walt Longmire And I was going to be down there talking with them and a good friend of mine, Kathy Norris, who's head of the PR for the BNSF Railroad, wrote me an email, and she said, "Well, Craig, you're supposed to be down in Casper for the Peace Officers Association meeting, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And she goes, "Well, the next book is about a train, isn't it?" And I said, yeah, the next book's about a train. And she goes, "Would you like a train?" I'd never been offered a train before. I started feeling like a robber baron. I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'd love a train. And she explained, she said, "Well, what we're doing is one of our executive junket trains is going from up in Tacoma back to Topeka, and we can angle that train all the way through Wyoming if you'd like, and also give all of the sheriffs a ride on a train. And this is not just an average train either. This is this is Warren Buffett's train, right? And this has got wood paneling with artwork on the walls and big velvet curtains and boardrooms, and sleeping quarters and all this kind of stuff." And so we got down there and of course we took the train and had an absolutely magnificent time that. But I have to admit that the thing that I enjoyed the most was sitting there talking with those sheriffs and getting stories off of them. And I got to tell you, two of the best ones that I heard were actually from two guys from California. They actually had, these workshops that they were doing that. And the first one that made me laugh was actually, and also the newest sheriff in Teton County over in Jackson Hole is actually from Riverside. And so it was really kind of fun for me to hear him talk about the differences between being born, growing up, and being a police officer in Riverside, and then suddenly being a Wyoming sheriff. And so I'm talking with him about it, and I said, "Well, was it tough making that kind of an adjustment?" And he goes, No. He said, "It was really pretty easy, after I got the hang of things." He said, "But, we get these, department memos that come out first thing in the morning to kind of give you an indication of what the day is going to be like." And he said, "And I remember my first day as a sheriff's deputy there in Teton County, And he said, I got the memo up, like it said that there were 9 stolen cars. Like it, and I went to the sheriff and I said, well, we have a little bit of a problem here. We have 9 stolen cars in Jackson. And there was a long pause, and he goes, rookie, that's for the whole state. So he said the curve was a little sharp at first, you know. And then the other one that cracked me up was there was a guy actually from the SWAT team from the LAPD, like that, who was there doing some workshops, and we were all, you know, everybody was telling like Wyoming stories, and he goes, you know, this LAPD guy, and he goes, I got a Wyoming story, and we were like, really? Like, and he goes, yeah, like that. He said, you know, we had a rookie that started, you know, on the department there in Los Angeles, like it, and you know, and he said, you know, what you do is like everybody always tunes in on that one number, that one unit number, because everybody's concerned about this rookie cop, make sure he's, you know, going to be okay and everything, and so they said, you know, he called in, like that, he said, 1029 dispatch, I've got a vehicle, you know, contact here, like that, I want to check a plate, like that, and they said, sure, go ahead, like that, and he goes, well, it's a blue Ford pickup truck with Wyoming plates. She goes, okay, like that, and he goes, what's the number? Have you guys seen a Wyoming plate? Do you know what they look like? They have like a bucking horse, you know, steamboat, you know, on them, and he goes, 1, long pause, little man on a horse. Okay. And of course, like, I mean, the entire LAPD was suddenly on the radio, like, giving him wrath of crap about it, like that. But anyway, like that, the reason why I am here is actually this little book here, The Western Star, like that. And as I said, this is the 13th book in the series, like that. I think we've been on the New York Times bestsellers list. I think it's been about 9 books in a row, like that. And so if we don't break the record with this one, we'll see what happens. But that was just a blatant attempt to get you to go back there and buy a book, was what that was. Like, just so you know. Like, but it didn't always start out that way. Like that. I mean, whenever I can be honest with you and tell you what my life is like a little bit now. To be honest, when we start the tour, like that, generally we start them over in Cody at the Buffalo Bill Museum, and then head north and go up to Billings to jump on a plane, because my wife won't fly on the planes that are in northern Wyoming, because they're the ones where they give you a leather helmet and goggles and say jump in, you know. And so anyway, we're on our way up there. Like that. When I'm not wearing one of these, I'm wearing one of those Absaroka County Sheriff's Department ball caps that we sell on the website. Like that. And they look pretty real. If you didn't know there was no 24th county in Wyoming, if you didn't know that there was no such thing as Absaroka County, they look pretty real. Like that. And so mine's kind of weathered down, you know, and I had that on my head. And I go over to pay for lunch at this little cafe on the outskirts of Red Lodge, Montana. So I'm going over and I'm writing out the check for lunch. And the woman behind the counter, she goes, "Where'd you get that hat?" And I thought, you know, as a matter of fact, I can see one right there. Could you hold that up for everybody to take a look at there? There's one right there. And so anyway, like she says, you know, "Where'd you get that hat?" And she said it really kind of aggressively. And I thought, oh no, you know, somebody's dined and ditched, you know, and I'm going to have to go chase somebody down the main street of Red Lodge, you know, because they wouldn't pay their bill. Like, and so I looked at her and I pointed at my head and I said, it's not a real county. And she goes, "The hell it's not. It's Walt Longmire's county." So I felt like I'd been smacked, you know, and so I looked at her and I go, "Well, I'm Craig Johnson," and she goes, "So?" And I said, "Well, I'm the guy that writes the books," and she goes, "What books?" Okay. It was that moment that the little voice in the back of my head said to me, "You should just get out of here, you know, take whatever shreds of dignity you got left and just, you know, skulk out the door here." But my pride wouldn't let me do it. Like, and so I said, "Well, the books that the TV show Longmire is based off of." Like, and I'll never forget her response. She goes, "There are books?" And I was like, told Viking Penguin, I said, "That's going to be our motto from now on whenever I go on tour. Yes, there are books." Like, and so... But it didn't start out that way. Like, whenever I started out like that, I knew well enough like that I needed to go and learn about sheriffing, like that, which is a very specific form of law enforcement. It's the only elected law enforcement official in the United States. Like that, and so I thought, okay, you need to know about sheriffing. Like that, and so what I did was I drove in the 18 miles there in Johnson County, my county, into Buffalo, the county seat. And this is for 9/11, so there was like no computer rooms or bulletproof glass or anything like that. And so I walk in the door like that, and I look, and down the hallway there's a guy with the door propped open. He's got his boots up on the desk like that, and so I go over to the wooden counter and I knock on the counter, and this voice goes, "What?" And I said, "Hey, Sheriff, could I talk to you for a minute?" And so this guy comes out. His name was Larry Kirkpatrick. We started talking a little bit, and I said, "My name's Craig Johnson. I got a little ranch out near Ucross, and I'm writing a murder mystery about a Wyoming sheriff. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to kind of help me, vet the chapters on this thing." And so he said, "Well, come on back to the office." And I did. We talked for a little while, not too long, maybe about 5 or 10 minutes or so. And he said, "Well, you know what? Sure, what the heck? I don't know how much help I'm going to be but I'll give it a shot." And so I was so impressed with the fact that I had solved this problem that I went home and added on to my house. And then I built, corrals and chutes and a shop and a barn, kind of had a little bit of a cow-calf operation going, And my wife had a store she wanted to open up over in Sheridan, and there was an old opera house, so I went in, I tore it all out, and we got it all up and going, and got her store all up and going. And then finally came home one day and walked into the office in the back of the ranch and pulled out the drawer, third drawer down on the right-hand side back in the office, and those 2 lonely little chapters of The Cold Dish, the very first Walt Longmire novel, were looking up at me, and 10 years had gone by. So I don't want to hear any of that crap about writer's block, okay? So I pulled those 2 lonely little chapters out, and they were just as bad as I remembered them being from 10 years previously. And I'm telling you, they were bad. I know, I wrote them, okay? And so I'm looking at them, and I'm thinking, God, I'm going to have to go in, and I'm going to have to reintroduce myself to the sheriff all over again. I knew he was still the sheriff because I'd voted for him 3 times, I hadn't spoken a word to him, and so I thought, this is going to be embarrassing, So I hadn't worked up the nerve to do it yet, but I drove into town one day to put gas in my truck. So I'm going in, I'm putting diesel in my truck, and I'm standing there at the pump island, and I'm standing there, and all of a sudden this cruiser pulls in on the other side of the pump island and stops. And this guy gets out, and he starts putting, fueling up his unit, and he turns around, and he's looking at me, and he pops his hat back, and he drops his Ray-Bans down on his nose, and he folds his arms, and he's looking at me. And he's giving me this look that says, "What did I arrest you for, and when was it?" And so I thought, this is going to be even more embarrassing than I thought because it's going to be in public. So I stuck out my hand, and I said, "Sheriff Kirkpatrick, you're probably not going to remember me." And he goes, "Your name's Craig Johnson. You're the one that's writing the murder mystery about the Wyoming sheriff." This was a 10-minute conversation from almost 10 years previous. And I looked at him and I said, "That is absolutely amazing." And he looks back at me and he goes, Yeah, if you don't mind me saying so, this book's going kind of slow." Well, that pissed me off. So I got serious about it, and started in on this thing, and I rewrote that first chapter of The Cold Dish, and I got that first chapter done. It was 11:30 at night. It was really kind of late at night, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to fire this thing in. By that time they had internet, and emails, and so I had his card, and I thought, you know what, I'll just send it in to the sheriff's department, and that way he can read it whenever he gets a chance to, read it. He can read it, and so I, fire the thing off. It's 11:20 at night, and I go to bed. And I get up the next morning. It's a ranch, so I'm up early. So I, get things squared away, down at the barn, come back up, feeding the horses, and I make a pot of coffee. And one of my favorite things to do is just walk out on the porch and just listen and breathe the air. So I walk out there with my coffee cup, and I'm looking off, and I can see the sun coming up over the Wolf Valley, at my back to the Bighorn Mountains, and I'm looking out there, and all of a sudden I hear a strange noise, a noise that we just don't hear in Ucross, Wyoming. I can hear a siren off in the distance, and so I walk to the edge of the porch, and I'm looking, and it's about a mile down the ranch road, before it connects with the county road, and I'm looking down there at the far end, and all of a sudden I see this police car sliding to a stop, and then comes barreling up the ranch road at about 90 miles an hour, fishtail in the hallway, spraying gravel, all this kind of stuff, slides to a stop right in front of the house. The door flies open. Sheriff Larry steps out and looks at me and goes, "I know who did it." And all I could think was, I must be really shitty at this, And so, I said, "Larry, are you sure you want to guess? I mean, you're only 1 chapter into a 16-chapter book with an epilogue. Are you sure you want to guess this early?" And he goes, "It's my county. I'm a trained professional. I know who did it." And I was like, "Okay, well, who did it?" And he guessed he was wrong. And I took a great deal of satisfaction in telling him that he was wrong. And so he just goes, "Damn," and this, throws his hat back in the truck, climbs back in, turns around, goes back down the driveway. And I was like, "Well, hell, I've lost that that piece of information, that piece of research, haven't I? Like, and so he disappears. Like, and I think it was like maybe about a week later, I got another chapter done. And I had another chapter done, like, and I thought, well, what the heck? I had heard a word from him. So I thought, well, I'm just going to send it in. But this time I was going to be smart. I was going to send it in around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I, take the chapter and I send it in around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 20 minutes later, the phone rings. I answer the phone. It's Larry. And he goes, I know who did it now. I said, Larry, you can't guess after every chapter. And he goes, the hell I can't. It's my county. I can guess as many times as I want. So I said, all right, well, who did it? And he guessed again. He was wrong again. And I said, not yet. And he goes, you're just changing it every time I guess. And I said, no, Larry, I've got an outline I'm working from. He guessed after every single chapter, and he never got it right. And that's when I started feeling, pretty good. I started thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm not as bad as I think I am. So anyway, I felt pretty good about it. And then something strange happened like that. I got picked up by a big agent in New York, who passed me over to Catherine Court over at Viking Penguin, and they sat me down. I remember her having the advanced reader copy of The Cold Dish and having it sitting on the lunch table between us. And she said, we'd like some more of these. And I said, well, I'm happy to do you guys some more books. And she goes, no, I don't think you understand. We want some more of these. We think these characters, this place, everything about it, people are going to want more of this. And that's when I, with the knowledge of not even having had one book published, started arguing with the president of Penguin USA and going, I don't think that's a really good idea, but I've got some other ideas I want to bounce off of you. And she goes, why don't you go back to your ranch and think about this? And so I did, and I thought, well, do these characters have more stories to tell? And I thought, yeah, they probably do. They probably do. And I thought, well, nobody else is going to write them, so maybe you should sit down and write them. So I started in like that. Well, the first book came out, The Cold Dish, and it was really kind of wonderful because I got contacted by the first library that I'd ever been contacted by. And I'm kind of an expert on libraries, I got to tell you, because they contacted me. There's a little town called Meeteetse over in the western part of the state, and it's Arapahoe for where the chiefs meet. And they contacted me and they said, hey, we understand, you're the writer of the new book, Cold Dish, and we were wondering if you'd be willing to think about coming over here to Meeteetse and doing a library event. And nobody ever asked me to do anything in a library other than shh, so I was, kind of excited. So I wrote him back immediately. I said, absolutely, I would be delighted to, And she wrote me back, and she goes, well, just so you know, we're just a little branch library, out of Cody here in Park County, and we don't have a lot of money for honoraria or anything. And so I quick looked up what an honoraria was, and I wrote her back, and I said, well, once you reach a certain level of literary notoriety, very difficult to negotiate your own honoraria. Mine's the same as it's always been, a 6-pack of Rainier beer cans preferred. Well, she wrote me back about 10 minutes later and said, done. And the problem is that got in all of the newspapers in Wyoming. And subsequently, I have done all 63 of the libraries in Wyoming. I haven't bought beer in about 7 years, So, yeah. Don't congratulate me too much. Like I said, I haven't bought beer in about 7 years, so it's kind of been mutually beneficial for both parties. But anyway, it was fun because then later on down the road, one of the things that happened is one of the books got picked as the first state read for Wyoming, which I'm very, very proud of. Spirit of Steamboat was the first state read for the state of Wyoming. And I know here in California, you've got big counties and big towns, and you can do county reads and city reads and all that. It takes all of us in Wyoming to gather together to do a read. And so we did, it was kind of wonderful, and what was fun was I came down, to the state library down in Cheyenne, and the state librarian brought, this 18-pack. It was rampant feather bedding down in the county, in the state capitol. But she brings it out. Let me tell you how much librarians like bringing beer into their libraries. It was wrapped up, with brown paper and packing tape and twine and everything. It looked like heroin is what it looked like by the time she was done with it. So she brings it out and she sits it down and she goes, this was really kind of hard to get. And I said, well, yeah, I know. I said, it's kind of a working class beer. A lot of the bars don't carry it anymore. And she goes, no, you don't understand. The distributors had a hard time getting it. And I said, well, yeah, if the bars don't carry it, the distributors don't carry it. She goes, no, you still don't understand. They're out of beer. This was 2 weeks into Longmire. The TV show had started, and everybody saw Walt drinking Rainier beer, and they all ran out and bought it. I don't know if they drank it, but they bought it, And so it sounded a little funny to me, so I thought, I'm going to check this out. And so I called, and you know what? Their national headquarters is right over here in Riverside. And so I called them up on the phone, and I said, hey, are you guys having, we are out of beer. We are totally out of beer. We have been brewing this stuff since Prohibition. We've had a spike in sales, and we have no idea what's going on. And and I said, well, we've got what we call in my business a clue. And so I told them about how they were the signature drink, for, the Wyoming sheriff. And we had a really wonderful conversation, about the beer and all this kind of stuff. And they thanked me for it. And they actually bring a tanker truck full of Rainier beer to Longmire Days when we do Longmire Days. It's gone in like 10 minutes. But it's really kind of cool. So we're having this really wonderful conversation, and he says, well, don't worry, though, because we're in full production, and so it'll be back out on the shelves here in about 4 days, which kind of gives you an indication of how long it takes to make Rainier beer, okay? So drink at your own risk. That is all I can tell you at this point in time. But that's when things really started hopping. I have to admit, and a lot of people ask me that question. A lot of the time they'll say, well, did you have anything to do, with, the television show, especially with the casting that went on with the television show And I have to admit that I actually did. I don't know if you guys have seen, at the newest edition of Cowboys and Indians magazine for this month, but it's got the galoot on the front right there. There he is, in all his glory. When I look at myself in the mirror, that's what I look like, I got to tell you. I do that hard look, that's it right there. I just want you to know. But anyway, and I do get asked that question: how much of Craig Johnson is Walt Longmire? And my wife has the best answer to that. She says Walt Longmire is who Craig would like to be in 10 years. It's just he's off to an incredibly slow start. But on the other side, what happened was they actually did. They made me a creative consultant on the television show, and what that means is I know where the porta potties are on set. Is what that means. And then what happened was they did something strange that kind of indicated to me that that they wanted me to sing for my supper, that they were really serious about it. They actually sent me a box of DVDs of the auditions for all of the actors that they were considering for Walt Longmire, which was really kind of strange, because the first thing, you guys probably know a heck of a lot more about Hollywood than I do, but the first thing they generally want to do is get rid of the novelist as fast as they can so that they can do what it is that they do. And it's perfectly reasonable because a lot of novelists can kind of be pains in the butt. So anyway, it never rains on Thursday, or my character would never wear a green shirt or something stupid like that. But anyway, it was kind of interesting, that they would send me, those DVDs because they did ask me previously. They said, well, whenever you think of Walt Longmire, are there any actors, that you think of? And I said, no, I don't know any actors. So I wouldn't be any, and I don't go see that many movies, and so I'm not going to be that much help to you in trying to figure that out. And so they said, well, if you were to think of actors for Walt Longmire, who do you think of? And I was like, Joel McCrae, Ben Johnson, Gary Cooper would be a good Walt Longmire. And they said that was no help at all because all those guys have been dead for 40 years. So I told them, I said, well, I'm not going to be much help to you guys anyway. And so they kind of gave it up And then it was a surprise, whenever those DVDs showed up And they had two different ways that they could go with the television show. They could either go with somebody who was going to be a big name that would draw an audience, to the show, or they could go with somebody who was a relative unknown. And I got to admit that I was kind of rooting for the relative unknown, I have to admit. Simply because you guys know as well as I do that if a character wears one of these, there are about 6 guys in Hollywood that get that role over and over and over again. And they're all wonderful performers, but for my money, they've kind of gone to the well one time too many. And so, you don't really look at them as the character anymore. You look at them as this conglomeration of all of these cowboy roles, that they've already played. So I was kind of rooting for the unknown guy. Well, there's a problem with that one, of course, in the sense that, Walt Longmire is not exactly a spring chicken, So any actor that plays Walt Longmire is going to have to be 50, 60 years old at least, right? Well, if you're in Hollywood and you're an actor and you're 50 or 60 years old and you're still unknown, you might suck, and they're always really nervous about that whole suck thing in Hollywood, I got to tell you, and so anyway, I was, kind of rooting for the unknown guy, but didn't know how much hope there was going to be for that, and so anyway, the wife and I are sitting there at the ranch, and so I'm pulling out these DVDs of all these guys attempting to be Walt Longmire, and we're putting them in the DVD player, and it's, really kind of weird, people ask, what's it like to have your characters suddenly, be on the screen or something like that. The only thing that I can describe it is, it's kind of like having a house plant in your house for like 7 or 8 years and then getting up one morning and have it start talking to you is what it's like. It's kind of weird, wonderful, but weird, just the same. And so anyway, in the audition, we're watching all these guys attempt to be Walt Longmire, and none of them are really kind of clicking for me, I have to admit. But in the audition, it's in the pilot episode of Longmire, where Walt goes and does a notification of death is what he's doing. It's the worst job in law enforcement. It's where you go into someone's home, a stranger that you've never met, and you tell them that their loved one is never coming home. It's just the worst. And so all of these guys are attempting to be Walt like that. And finally, we get to the very last DVD. And I look at the last DVD, and I'm pretty sure it's the way they planned it. And I look down, and it said Robert Taylor. And I was like, well, they took my advice after all, didn't they? I am so glad you guys laughed. The under 30 crowd does not get that joke at all. They really don't. And so anyway, I put the DVD in, and this guy comes on, and he's this tall, lanky guy, about 6'3", 230 pounds, He's got lines in his face. He's got this gravelly voice and everything. He's got miles on him, and that's what I really liked about him. He didn't look like a 6-week wonder. He had some miles on him, So I'm feeling really good about Robert Taylor at that point in time, and it was about then that my wife sitting behind me went, "Oh my." I turn around and look at her, and she goes, "He's handsome." And then she digs the hole a little bit deeper, and she goes, "He's kind of like a television version of you, taller, better looking, with a better voice." So I'm not as big of a fan of Robert Taylor as I used to be, but anyway, we've been pretty wonderful. The people that we have in the show are just magnificent to work with, and our 6th season, for Longmire is actually coming out at the end, I believe, of this month, possibly the beginning of October. I'm not exactly sure, but it's been an absolutely wonderful ride, to have them, and to have them where they actually come up to Buffalo, Wyoming, which is kind of the model for Durant in the books. I don't know if you've heard about Longmire Days, but it is the unnatural disaster of Wyoming, is what it is. It's where the actors come up and bring about 15,000 of their closest friends, and then all the grocery stores and all the restaurants run out of food. All the banks and ATM machines run out of money, and everybody walks around with their cell phones doing this, looking at the blue circle of death, because there's not enough bandwidth in the town, for all the cell phones. And my favorite thing to look at is look at them and go, "Why doesn't Walt carry a cell phone, huh?" How you like them apples, huh? But this one is a little bit different. This is the way I'm here today. And that's the Western Star. And it's a little bit different from some of the other books that I've done before. In that it kind of jumps back and forth between 1972 and the modern day. And the book starts out actually in Douglas, Wyoming, which is where the Law Enforcement Academy is. And Walt and Vic are down there doing their recertification with their weapons, And one of the traditions when you finish up with your recertification is you go over to the Labonte Hotel and have a drink, just to celebrate. So everybody heads over there, all these sheriffs and all these young sheriffs, and they're all wanting to hear stories, and Walt's not big into stories, but fortunately he's still got Lucian with him, and Lucian's always willing to tell stories. And Lucian's story, I think at the beginning of the book, basically is about the first 913 Xerox copier that they had in the Absaroka County Sheriff's Department, which he fools a murder suspect into thinking is a lie detector machine. Where he makes a photocopy of his hand and says, "Yeah, you're lying. You did it. Yeah, we got you. We got you red-handed." Unfortunately, I didn't get that line in the book But anyway, they're all over at the Labonte Hotel and they're having a drink and Joe Ironclad from Washakie County walks up to Walt and looks over Walt's right shoulder, and on the wall there's a photograph. It's a photograph of an 844 Northern locomotive. The very last steam locomotive never retired from a major rail line in the United States. As a matter of fact, they just rebuilt one at the UP Roundhouse down in Cheyenne, and they use it for junket trains that go out. So if you get a chance, make sure you go up there and take a look at it because it's absolutely gorgeous. So anyway, photos from 1972, and Joe looks and says, Walt, is that you on the end? Because there are 24 armed men standing in front of this locomotive with their gun belts on and their light-colored hats. And Walt turns around and looks, and he goes, yeah, that's me. That's 2 weeks after Lucian hired me back in 1972. And I just started up like that. And so Joe invites all the other sheriffs over like that, and he goes, look at this. This is the Western Star. This is the sheriff's train. And the basis of the book is that from 1948 to 1972, the Wyoming Sheriff's Association held its annual meeting on a train that went from Cheyenne to Evanston all the way across the state and back in one weekend. And so Joe Ironclad's looking at Walt, and he's going, 24 armed sheriffs on a train. And Walt looks at him and says, when we started. I hope you'll enjoy it. Okay. Thank you very much. One of the things I'm supposed to do is leave some time for some Q&A, but I want to warn you guys, the way this works, of course, since you've gotten to know me a little bit, I usually tell stories like that to answer questions. So it takes me about 20 minutes to answer each question. So we have time for one question. No, I'll stay here all night. You guys are a great crowd. It's wonderful to be here. You had the mic. You must have a question.
And I'll make it quick. You and Walt, obviously, are very unique characters.
Well, Walt is. You can talk to my wife. She's sitting 2 chairs over from you, so you can talk to her about that.
In any case, you do audio books.
Mm-hmm.
And did you ever consider doing the voiceover yourself on your audio books?
Never. It never occurred to me, not once, to think about it. I think it's just human nature. You hear your own voice and you want to throw up, and I'm firmly of that belief. I don't want to hear my voice ever. I've heard it enough for one lifetime like that. And then what happened also, I got to be honest with you, one of the great things that happened to me very early on was I had a short story that was actually in Cowboys and Indians magazine that won the Tony Hillerman short story award. One of the great things about it was I got to go have dinner with Tony Hillerman down in Albuquerque. And Tony's always been one of my great heroes and just one of the most golden individuals you could have ever possibly wanted to meet. I mean, an absolute charming, charming man. And I remember when I walked into the restaurant to have dinner with him, the first thing he said to me was, are you the one that wrote The Cold Dish? And I said, yes, I am. And he goes, that was the best book I read all last year. And I said, you and I are going to get along. But anyway, he had a wonderful dinner, and he knew at that point in time that I was actually doing the negotiations for the audiobooks. That they were going to do. And I didn't know anything. I don't know anybody who was recording or anything about that stuff. And Tony said, well, if you can get George Guidell, get him, because he does my books. And so the next day when I was talking to, recorded books, they said, well, we've got a couple of different readers that we're thinking about. One of them is a fellow by the name of George Guidell, and I said, him. And they said, you don't want to hear the others? And I said, no, if he's good enough for Tony Hillerman, he's good enough for me, okay? And it was kind of wonderful like that, because by the time we got to the 4th book, Another Man's Moccasins, I happened to be in New York, and I got to go in and do an interview, with George after they did the recordings of the CDs. And it was really kind of great like that, because I got to see, how he does what he does. And he's just an amazingly consummate performer like that, really does a lot of study about the books before he sits down to do the recordings, and is just an amazing guy. And so anyway, as a matter of fact, I think it was about 2 months ago, they did an article on him in the New York Times where they were talking to him, and they said, because he's won more Audies than anybody, and they said, they finally got to the end of the conversation, and they said, well, you've done War and Peace, and you've done Dickens, and you've done Shakespeare, you've done all of these authors, and who are your favorite books to record? And George goes, there are these books about this Wyoming sheriff that I really like doing. And I was like, George, you are the guy. I got to tell you. But it was really kind of funny like that, because actually when they clicked off the machines and stopped recording, I looked at him and I said, you must have an amazing singing voice, because, you have this range, of voices that you do. And he goes, oh no, you don't ever want to hear me sing. You don't ever want to hear me sing. I'm a horrible, horrible singer. And I was like, really? I don't know if you guys remember or not, but the next book was The Dark Horse. And that's the one where Walt's out on the Powder River in that cheap motel, and the guys next door are playing the AM radio really loud, and it's Eddie Arnold's cattle call, oh, 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 oh. So I put that in the book, and George calls me up on the phone and goes, you son of a bitch. I was like, "What's the matter? Hi, George. How are you?" Like, and he goes, "You know what? For 4 books, you don't have Walt sing. I tell you, I don't sing. All of a sudden, you have Walt sing. Like, it's even worse than that. You have Walt yodel, really? Like, so I don't know if he's fully forgiven me yet or not. I don't know. I'm waiting to find out. So, anybody else? Anybody else got a question?
Oh, thank you for being here.
Oh, my
first of all.
pleasure.
This
My
is
pleasure.
exciting. You told us a little bit about how you prepared for the mentality and the background of the sheriff.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit how you prepared for the Native Americans and the life on the reservation?
It's actually, could you guys hear the question? Did you guys hear it? Okay, because sometimes I'm supposed to repeat the question and I always forget. But she was asking about the spirituality and the Native American aspect of the books, like that, which to me are really kind of essential, to the books. I have to be honest with you, simply because where my ranch is up on the Wyoming-Montana border, my neighbors to the north are the Crow and the Northern Cheyenne, and so it's very essential, to me to have them be a part of the books. Whenever I'm reading a book about the West, and certainly about the contemporary West, and they don't have any Indians in the books, I'm like, you're kind of robbing us of, we have few enough ethnicities as it is, on the high plains. And so to leave them out completely is just what I refer to as criminal, like that. But one of the nice things is that, one of my favorite quotes is the one from Wallace Stegner, where he says, the greatest piece of fiction ever written is the disclaimer at the beginning of every book that says nobody in this book is based off anybody alive or dead. And what a crock that is. I mean, that's your job, to go find interesting people and put them in your books. And the reason I tell you this is because if you talk to me for more than 9 seconds, you're taking your literary life in your hands. But for me, it's, it provides a certain number of problems in the sense that whenever, because now granted, my home state is only has 500,000 people in it. So inevitably, when I stick somebody in my books like that, from Gillette in the northeast corner, and then go down and do a library event in the southwest corner in Rock Springs, somebody will come up to me and go, "Is that so-and-so from Gillette in your 3rd book?" And I have to say that I can either confirm or deny that maybe the person that you just mentioned. But it's even worse up on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, because there are only 5,000 enrolled members of the Northern Cheyenne. And, these are friends of mine, really close friends and neighbors and practically, family members for me, like that. And so what's been interesting is that, I just, ruthlessly just take them and stick them in the books all over the place. Like that. I even got to the point where I didn't even bother changing their names anymore, like that, because everybody promised me they wouldn't sue me, like that. And so I thought, well, what the heck, like that. And so I did a lot of that. And it's been interesting like that, because with the success of the books and with the success of the television show, it's been kind of amazing to see like that, but there are tons of people who claim to be in my books that I've never met. But I take that as, a great, compliment, that they want to be in the books. But it is a sovereign nation unto itself. Like at the Northern Cheyenne, the Crow reservations are sovereign nations unto yourself. Walt actually has no jurisdiction up there as a sheriff. And so it's important for me to have them in the books in every sense, just simply because I think there's a spirituality that they bring to the books that is absolutely essential to the books. One of the Native American philosophies in many ways is a question of slowing down. They're all about slowing down. Here we are, in a technologically driven society where everything is supposed to go faster, 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 faster. All these little devices that we have that are supposed to simplify our lives but seem to do nothing but complicate our lives. Whereas, in the Native American philosophy, you're supposed to slow down. You're supposed to see more. You're supposed to be more aware of what's going on around you. And the key element in that, of course, is the moment of now, at where we are right here, right now. This is an amazing moment in your life right now. And you can make the mistake of regretting your past and worrying about your future and rob yourself of those moments that go along in your life. And you really need to be there for those more than anything else. And I think that's one of the things I really love about the Northern Cheyenne. The other that I try and put in the books as much as I possibly can is I don't think there's ever been a group of individuals that have been more maligned as not having a sense of humor as much as the American Indian, right? Because they're always portrayed as these stoic, cigar store kind of characters, that kind of stuff, with the stern face and all that. That's not the Indians I know. The Indians I know work on about 17 different layers of irony, and if you're not aware of the irony, you get to be the butt of that irony, okay? And I do say Indians, I don't say Native Americans simply because my Northern Cheyenne buddies make fun of me when I try and be politically correct. They always look at me and go, "Where were you born?" I was born in America. So you would be a Native American too then, wouldn't you? So But I can give you an indication of what that sense of humor is like a little bit too, like that. Actually, there was a men's journal like that got in touch with me and said they wanted to come out and do an interview. And so they got there, like, and the photojournalists were there, and they said, well, we'd like to go up on the res. And I said, well, let me make a few phone calls. You don't just buzz up there and start taking photographs. Let me make a few phone calls and see what we can do. Like, and so I call up my buddy Marcus Red Thunder, who's actually the model for Henry Standing Bear in the books. And I called him up like that, and I said, hey, what do you think? Can we go up? And he says, yeah, let me get a hold of Charles Little Old Man and see if I can get things squared away, and we'll be able to use him. Like that. And so he is actually Lonnie Littlebird in the books. Like that. And I can go down the list and give you every single equivalency all the way down, as you go. And so anyway, we call up Charles. Charles says, absolutely, bring them on ahead. Like that. So we come on up. And we get up there, like, and of course, he says, let's take them on the East Ridge. We've got those teepee rings that are like about 5,000 years old. Like, he says, they'll really enjoy that. Let's take them out there. Like, and so we get out there, and of course, this is the Wyoming-Montana border, so the wind is blowing at about 40 or 50 miles an hour, right? And Charles is like 94 years old, okay? Like, so I'm kind of worried about Charles, falling or something like that. I needn't have worried. As soon as the cameras came out and the flash bulbs started popping, Charles goes into noble savage mode. We're all dying laughing, and finally one of the photographers looks at Charles and he goes, "This is such a beautiful place, but how do you get used to the wind?" And I remember Charles didn't even change his look; he just goes, "What wind?" I told you 20 minutes for each question, so.
The first book of yours that I read was The Dark Horse. And this is more of a comment than a question, but I was so taken with the prose in the first 15, 30 pages. I mean, you have wonderful character development.
Thank you.
And the plots are wonderful.
Have you guys met my sister? Have you met my sister?
The writing is so beautiful.
Thank
I've
you.
never been to Wyoming, but I felt like after I read the first 10 pages, I could close my eyes and put myself right there.
Thank
And
you.
So I guess my question is, when did you start writing, and how did you build this repertoire?
Thank you so much. That's some really wonderful comments like that, and that's really essential to me too, like that, because that's kind of one of the essential elements of like when I'm writing the books that I take into consideration, that whether you live in Wyoming or whether you don't, like that, because the books have been translated into about a dozen languages like that, and so it's really kind of fun for me, for even people from other countries like that to get the idea of where Wyoming is, because an awful lot of the time people don't know where Wyoming is, like it's I'm always explaining that it's between Montana and Colorado, and a lot of them go, "There's a state there, really?" So, yep, quite some time actually. But for me, that's kind of an important element, I think. And I'm always thinking about that, whenever I'm writing the books, in the sense that Walt is kind of emblematic of that West, and that sweeping epic grandeur that is the American West. Like that, to me, is absolutely essential. I'm not going to try and quote it again like that, because you'll get tired of hearing me quote Wallace Stegner badly like that. But one of the statements that he made was that we need the solace of open spaces. If for no other reason, even if we don't ever go out into it, but just so that we can drive to the edge of it and look into it and remind ourselves of the creatures that we are, to help us keep our sanity. And I think that for me is constantly an issue whenever I'm writing the books, because my books don't take place in a precinct house in the Bronx like that. They don't take place like that in a police station in L.A. or New York or Chicago or anywhere else. They're out and away. And anybody that's ever had any kind of dealings with being a Western sheriff or sheriff's department knows that the trouble is generally out there. That's where you're going to run into the problems like that, and it's always there. It's another one of those aspects of balancing out the technology too, like that, because we kind of lull ourselves in many ways into thinking like that we have control over nature, that we have control over the natural world, like that, with all of our phones and our air-conditioned cars and all that kind of stuff. When we pulled up and got out, here, it was 113 degrees when I opened up that truck door, and I was like, whoa. And, and I was talking with the librarians, and they said, well, yeah, this is a little warm, like that, and then sometimes we wonder, why do we live here? And I'm like, yeah, when it's about 40 degrees below zero in Wyoming, we had the same conversation, but it's simple, to confuse that and think to yourself, that we're insulated, that we have this insulatory kind of quality about the modern world, like that. But boy, that natural world is out there just waiting for the opportunity, like that. And in so many ways, sometimes it's not a negative thing. Sometimes it can be one of the most beautiful and wonderful things that you can ever have happen to you. One of the things I really love, one of the stories that I love more than anything is a philosophy that the Northern Cheyenne have, where owls are the messengers that go back and forth, between the camp of the dead and our world. And they use the hanging road, which is the arc of the Milky Way galaxy that you see in the night sky that arches over, like that. And it's just such beautiful imagery, like that. And one of the things I do whenever I go out down to feed the horses in the morning, at night rather, like that, when I feed the horses at night, I'll come back out of the barn and I'll walk out of the barn and just look up and just stand there, just looking at those stars. And sometimes I forget, how long I've been standing there. My legs will literally, just turn to wood, as I'm standing there for long enough. And pretty soon, inevitably, the horses are all standing around me, looking up too, trying to figure out what I'm looking at. But I don't think they get the whole idea of, that poetry as well as I do. Maybe in a different way, I don't know, like that. But I think surrounded by that, it's kind of hard to walk away from it. It's kind of hard to escape it. And it's always going to be, a major permutation in the books. It always will be. But thank you so much for that kindness. Thank you. One of the, I was thinking about that the other day. Somebody asked me, they said something about, the question about, the big, horse scene, towards the end of the book. And I got to tell you that that actually came from a good buddy of mine, Buck Brannaman. You may have heard of Buck. There was a documentary called Buck that they did, and he's an amazing horse trainer. He actually was the model for the Horse Whisperer. So if you don't know him, you probably do know him, actually, like that. And I was talking to him one day, like that, and he said, what I'd like to see in a book or a movie sometime? And I said, no, what's that? And he goes, a horse chase at night. And I was like, crap, nobody has ever done that, have they? And he goes, those things don't have headlights, Craig. And I was like, oh, that's a challenge. And that, for me, that became one of the big excitements of that particular book, was that race across the basalt, mesa, at night. It was fun, I have to admit. So anyway, do one more. Is that okay? One or two more?
Well, I'm going to follow up those meaningful comments and those deep questions with a shallow one.
Okay.
Are you going to marry off Walt?
It's always women that ask that question. Guys don't seem to care. Now, of course, they're the ones that'll ask me, Katie Sackhoff, really? She's kind of cute. Actually, I can tell you a quick story. Then I'll get back to your question. I actually had a dispatcher. My good friend Kim is here. And she's a dispatcher, so she can back me up on this. But I love stories from sheriffs but I love stories from deputies more because they'll tell you the truth. And then I really love the dispatcher, because they'll really tell you the truth. And so in Fremont County, I actually got a call from the dispatcher down there, and she calls me up and she goes, Craig, I got a story for you. And I said, okay. And she goes, we had a moral issue with one of our deputies. And I said, oh, really? What was it? And she said, well, this woman called in. She said she had seen one of our deputies and the top 3 buttons of her uniform shirt were open, and that she thought that was extraordinarily unprofessional and somebody needed to do something about that. And so she said, well, okay. She said, I can see from your number that you're calling from California. Were you in Fremont County recently? And she goes, no, I wasn't. And she goes, well, were you in Wyoming recently? And she goes, no, I wasn't. And she goes, where did you see one of our deputies? She goes, I saw her on television on Monday night. So jump cut to Fremont County dispatcher with fist in mouth, trying to not laugh like that. But it's funny too, because with the relationships, as far as the characters are concerned, one of the pieces of advice, that I got very early on, there were 2. The first one was, don't give your protagonist any pets, because you'll have to take care of those pets, and it'll become a problem later on. And I kept thinking, I got a whole ranch full of animals that I take care of. I can see why Walt can't take care of one dog, for gosh sakes. And the other thing is, I'm basically writing about an armed man who drives long distances all over Wyoming. And, I could either have him talk to himself or I could have him talk to the dog. And I don't know about you guys, but armed people that talk to themselves really kind of make me nervous. And so I kind of thought the dog would be a good stream of consciousness, kind of thing for him. And it kind of led to some of my favorite sequences. There was one actually in Dark Horse, as a matter of fact. It's the one where he gets out of the truck and turns and looks at Dog and says, "Stay in the truck and don't play with the radio." And then he shuts the door and says it was our private joke. He knew he could play with the radio if he wanted to. And so... But the other piece of advice I got, and authors are always very free with their advice whenever you're first starting out. And some of these other authors, one of the things they said was, you can have sexual tension between characters in your books, but you can't let anything happen. You can't consummate it, for about, I said, well, for how long? And they said about 17 or 18 books. And my immediate response to that was, what kind of women are you dating anyway? That would... wait 17 or 18 years, for something to quote, unquote, happen. And so anyway, what I did was third book. I went ahead and just had something happen in the third book. Walt and Vic, they're strangers in a strange land in a very difficult situation, and something just happens, which is the way those things normally happen between friends. And the fun part for me was switching the gender roles because Walt has very much the more masculine response to this relationship by saying, what, that was a big, or more the female response, to it, by saying that was a big mistake and we are never going to do that again, and, we're just going to forget that ever happened. And Vic had the more stereotypical male response, which was that was really fun and I liked it and we're going to do that again, okay? So and it was kind of fun for me because I have to admit that when I wrote that scene in the book, I was really kind of a chicken about it, I have to admit. The whole, sex scene in my book was one paragraph long. That was it. It was 3 sentences. That was it. I got in there and got out. And so... I wrote that one sex scene, it took me 3 books to finally get up a nerve, to write this sex scene. It's 3 sentences long, right? Okay, so I go on tour with the book, and I'm actually in Olympia, Washington, I think it was. And I'm doing an event, and the woman in the front row is dying to ask a question, and finally I call on her, and she goes, "That sex scene in Kindness Goes Unpunished. I want to talk to you about that." And I was I'm thinking, okay, all right, here we go. And I said, "Yes, ma'am, what about it?" And she goes, "It went on forever." And I'm looking at her, I'm well, actually, it's, it was only about, 3 sentences long, and so she starts turning kind of bright red, and then I looked at her and I go, "How many times did you read it?" And she came clean. She goes, "I read it a bunch of times," and so I felt kind of vindicated at that point, but I don't know. I'm a big one. I've got an overarching, structure, for, each book and for groups of books, and then an overarching structure for the entire series of books, for me. And, I follow, I've followed, an awful lot of that structure along the way, but I don't like to push any of those issues, with the characters. They kind of tend to present themselves as you go along, as you get to know those characters a little bit. It's not that the characters are talking to you. Sometimes you'll hear authors say, "Oh, the characters just start talking, and I just, write down what they say." I don't know about you, but that worries me. Once again, people sitting in rooms by themselves, hearing, people's voices, that kind of worries me. All I think it is just, it's your subconscious mind is what it is, helping you to try and write that book is what it's trying to do. But for me, I kind of wait and let those things kind of evolve to a certain extent, as they should, as not trying to force those issues as much as I can. I think we're kind of reaching the end. I've got one more quick statement to make in the sense that as much as I love talking about Hollywood, as much as I love talking about the TV show and all that, I just want to celebrate the fact that we happen to be sitting in a library. And I got to be honest with you, as jealous as I am and as proud as I am, of our TV show, and they've got all of these wonderful aspects that they can take into consideration, these amazing performers, producers, directors, sets, everything that they do is just so incredible. The one thing that they really just can't really compete with is a good book. And I'll tell you why. The reason they can't compete with that is because I've got this one incredible secret weapon, this one incredible thing that I utilize in what it is that I do every day. It's called your imagination, is what it's called. It's where I go. I'm a wordsmith. That's my job, to get into your imagination and start lining up those words, like dominoes. Not too many, not too few, but just enough so that I can get enough of those dominoes put down to where all I have to do is use that one word that's going to kick off your imagination and tip that first domino over. And then your imagination does all the work for me from then on. And for that, I want to thank you. Thank you.